Welcome everyone to Half History Will Travel. I am your host, the Wilder Historian, and throughout the entire month of April, I will be dedicating videos to the Battle of Shiloh. And I wanted to whet your appetite with this video highlighting some post-Shiloh eyewitness accounts that illustrates the destruction found by the Union and the chaotic nature of the Confederate retreat. The first witness I want to highlight is by Edgar Pierce, a member of the 77th Ohio, who wrote to his brother about the aftermath of the battle as the Federal troops began to bury the dead. I received your letter last Sunday morning and will freely admit that I was very much pleased to see that you would really devote a whole sheet to your unworthy brother way down south in Dixie, and in the midst of Secesh. But although it is an exciting fact, it is here that we are in the midst of Secesh, for they lay all around us in the shelf of death. And now only a few rods from us are over 250 dead bodies in all Secesh. We did not bury the Union men and rebels together at all. A great number of them were killed on Sunday, and when I rode on the field on Friday last, dead bodies could still be seen lying around in the brush. It was a useful 24 hours work, but thank fortune now all is quiet and we still sit in our own beds. But we know not at what time the hole may open again in all its fury. We are directly in the advance, but now they have moved hosts of our army to the front, and we are back of center, and cannot be surprised as we were before. The enemy will at least make a desperate resistance if he does not make another attack himself. He is said to have an army of 120,000 at his command, but he may not hold this number. 5 rebel deserters came here a day or two ago, and one said he used all the eloquence he was master of to get his men to make an advance on us again, but was unable to get his men to come up to fire. If this is true, then it shows that his men are sensible to the last, for the probability is great they will get whipped most outrageously if they do try again. For we are the conquerors and they are the whipped and disheartened. We are flush with victory and they are disheartened by defeat. They are too confident on last Sunday evening a week ago, when Beauregard telegraphed home that this was a second Manassas, that the Yankees fought with stubbornness and with bravery of despair, but the Southern blood was too much for them, and the Federals were completely whipped, and the next morning he would take and kill the whole of the Federal forces. General Beauregard is an able general, or he would not have caught us in the way he did before. I can't help admiring him as a military man, though I do wish someone had been lucky enough to shoot him. However, Sidney Johnston, who was the commander-in-chief, was killed, and I have stood over his body. I have rode over this field and through the dead when the stench was so intolerable that my company, and old soldiers at that, had to throw their dinners all overboard, and that on horseback too. I had human bodies for landmarks from Monday till Friday night. By that time they were so bloated that you could hardly tell what they were, and Union men at that, literally torn all to pieces, heads gone, and bodies cut right in two. The Battle of Shiloh was a major moment in the American Civil War. First Manassas had scared the North and the South about a bloody war, but the death toll at Shiloh traumatized them, showed the incapability of armies to take care of the wounded and the dead on battlefields. The Northern people called for Lincoln to relieve Ulysses S. Grant of command, but the President famously stated, "I cannot spare this man. He fights." Now, let's look at the Confederates post-Shiloh. Beauregard moved his army back to Corinth, Mississippi to lick their wounds and prepare for another campaign. We pick up with Sam Watkins of the 1st Tennessee describing their stay in Corinth, and General Braxton Bragg as now commander of that army. Well, here we were, again reorganizing, and after our lax discipline on the road to and from Virginia, and after a big battle, which always disorganizes an army, what wonder is it that some men had to be shot merely for discipline's sake? And what wonder that General Bragg's name became a terror to deserters and evildoers? Men were shot by scores, and no wonder the army had to be reorganized. Soldiers had enlisted for 12 months only, and had faithfully complied with their volunteer obligations. The terms for which they had enlisted had expired, and they naturally looked upon it that they had a right to go home. They had done their duty faithfully and well. They wanted to see their families, in fact wanted to go home anyhow. War had become a reality, they were tired of it. A law had been passed by the Confederate States Congress called the Conscript Act. A soldier had no right to volunteer, and to choose the branch of service he preferred. He was a conscript. From this time on to the end of the war, a soldier was simply a machine, a conscript. It was mighty rough on rebels. We cursed the war. We cursed Bragg. We cursed the Southern Confederacy. All our pride and valor had gone, and we were sick of war and the Southern Confederacy. A law was made by the Confederate States Congress about this time allowing every person who owned 20 slaves to go home. It gave us the blues. We wanted 20 slaves. Slave property suddenly became very valuable, and there was raised the howl of a rich man's war, a poor man's fight. The glory of the war, the glory of the South, the glory and the pride of our volunteers had no charms for the conscript. We were directed to re-elect our officers, and the country was surprised to see the sample of a conscript's choice. Conscript had no choice. He was callous and indifferent whether he had a captain or not. Those who were at first officers had resigned and gone home because they were officers. The poor private, a contemptible conscript, was left to howl and gnash his teeth. The war might as well have ended then and there. The boys were hacked, nay whipped. They were shorn of the locks of their glory. They had but one ambition now, and that was to get out of the army in some way or other. They wanted to join the cavalry or artillery or home guards or pioneer corps or to be yeller dogs or anything. Their last hope had set. They hated war. To their minds the South was a great tyrant and the Confederacy a fraud. They were deserted by the thousands. They had no love or respect for Bragg. When men were to be shot or whipped, the whole army was marched to the horrid scene to see a poor trembling wretch tied to a post and a platoon of 12 men drawn up in line to put him to death. And the hushed command of ready aim fire would make the soldier, or conscript I should say, loathe the very name of the Southern Confederacy. And when some miserable wretch was to be whipped and branded for being absent 10 days without leave, we had to see him kneel down and have his head shaved smooth and slick as a peeled onion, and then stripped to the naked skin. Then a strapping feller with a big rawhide would make the blood flow and spurt at every lick, the wretch begging and howling like a hound, and then he was branded with a red-hot iron with the letter D on both hips when he was marched through the army to the music of the Rogue's March. It was enough. None of Bragg's soldiers ever loved him. They had no faith in his ability as a general. He was looked upon as a merciless tyrant. One of the biggest takeaways from this account is the brutality with which Braxton Bragg commanded the largest Confederate army in the Western theater. However, recent scholarship has indicated that deserters were not executed at any higher rate than for any other army commander. For more on that, check out my video entitled "Everything You Know About Braxton Bragg is Wrong." The link is in the description below. Additionally, we see a class conflict appear within the Confederate Army because of the special privilege given to slave owners in addition to the conscript laws put into effect that same year. Thank you all so much for watching, and have a great day, and I'll see you next time.
Historian, historian, where do you roam? Historian, historian, far, far from home. Have history will travel reads the card of a man, a professor with knowledge in the hard land. To educate the world is his mission. A professor of fortune is a man called historian. Historian.